Welcome around in this new episode of Let's Take. I'm super happy to be here today with James Serra. How are you doing, James?
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm super, and thanks for being on the show. I'm super happy to have you here and have many questions. But maybe for the people who might not know you, could you do a few sentences introduction?
Sure. I am currently at Microsoft. I've been in IT nearly 40 years in all sorts of roles. I won't go back to my COBOL days, but throughout the years, I've been a coder, developer, and then got into architecture. And then I was a DBA for many years and came to Microsoft about 9 years ago in a pre sales role. Essentially, what I do in this role is I focus on data and AI, and it's a knowledge transfer. I help educate customers on the Microsoft platform, in particular data architectures and our products that would fit those data architectures with the hope that they'll go and build solutions in Azure.
Awesome. Near 40 years. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm going to go straight to that point. How does it feel, and what are the advantages of being in field for I'm not saying I'm not calling anyone old or anything related to that, of course, but I feel that nearly 40 years into an industry is very impressive. And so do you have like some insights or some key lessons that that you really see being for this time into the field?
Yeah, and I am old, so it's okay to say that. And
I didn't say that.
yeah, and found I started when I was right after high school, and was involved when they had mainframes and whatnot. So the technology's changed so much, and I think, and I mentor a lot of people and career coach with them, and I tell them just find your passions, find out what part of information technology you're interested in, and and then get up to speed. And the whole key to I think being successful in a career is being a fast learner. Even though my brain cells have slowed down on there, I'm still able to cram quickly and learn new stuff because it changes so much, especially compared to when I first started on there. And then understand your passion may change a bit. So over the years, I was a coder and I thought I'd never stop coding, and I did that for like 20 years, and then I finally said, oh, I don't know if I like this as much anymore, and then switched to a DBA and then an architect and whatnot. And but it's exciting because there's so many different technologies in there, and there's so much. And I'm focused on data and AI, but I can barely keep up with data, and I somewhat keep up with AI on that. So it's just trying to focus more on what you're most interested in, and then finding a job that'll pay you for that. And essentially at Microsoft, and these roles that call it technical specialists, you're paid to present. You talk to customers, you whiteboard. I do architect design sessions. I present decks. I do demos on that. And part of the job is always learning and setting aside time every day to go and learn new features.
Awesome. Following up right on that, I like to ask about the state of the art of the guests on the show. And by that, I don't mean anything related to the technology itself. It's more like a fun game of what's your state of the art? What's your mission? What drives you today? Do you have insights on that?
What drives me is I like to have fun. And to me, learning is fun. And in a job like this, technology, every day I spend a couple hours at least learning on that. And it's something I have a passion for. And if you're a person that likes to learn, being technology is great. And especially at a company like Microsoft, any big tech company, they say the one constant is change on here. And every year they completely change the organization too, and roles and whatnot. So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable is also another saying here. But I love it just because I love to learn, and being in a technology role that is not repetitive allows me to have a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, you learn to embrace change and enjoy the journey. That's awesome. And so I'd love if that could be possible to do maybe a throwback, a brief retrospective of maybe key moments in your journey in your career. that you might share some insights with us. If you can share maybe like 4 or 5 key moments that and some lessons that you got with this, so that we kind of get a retrospective of this time. Even though I'm pretty sure we could 4 hour episode just with that question, but maybe you have some key lessons that you can share with us.
Oh, key moments in my career. I would say in ninth grade when somebody came for career day and talked about computer programming, and I was enthralled, and I went home and told my mom I want to be a computer programmer. I knew very early, and then I took classes in high school for it. And so key moments,
Mm.
I think, were being introduced to a certain type of job out there, and that's what I tell a lot of people, especially if they're in college. Why did you get this degree? Oh, this is what it seems like to me. Well, did you reach out to somebody and talk to them and find out what their day-to-day job is in there? So you need to go a little deeper there. Otherwise, sometimes people get a degree and they're like, well, turns out I didn't like this field. Well, you should, especially now with social media, get on LinkedIn, introduce yourself to somebody and ask them for some of their time. People are happy to help to find out what their jobs are like. So to me, it was finding out about computer programmers. And then I would say then once I had that role in there was finding out about some of the newer technologies in there and trying to have some idea of what's coming up and being aware that what you know now is not going to sustain you for many years. And early in my career, a lot of people thought, oh, I'll just be a programmer forever. And my thought was, well, look at this technology is coming. I think it's going to change. So it's always been in the forefront. So you're learning those new technologies. This way, you're more marketable on there. Other big points were switching roles into becoming a DBA was a big change in there when I got a little tired of programming, and again getting introduced what a DBA did. I said that's pretty cool. It's something I want to do, and so I switched to
What's
that.
a DBA? Sorry.
What's that?
What's a DBA? Sorry.
A chart database administrator. That's a
Okay,
person who takes care of the databases. So everything
hmm.
that you do is stored in the database, and somebody's got to make sure it's running. And that was me. I didn't enjoy calls 3 in the morning that something was wrong with the database, but the role itself was exciting. Other big points were I on the side I was coding for fantasy football, and this is when this internet came around. Even before that, and I thought, well, internet would be great for a fantasy football website and to run leagues. And so I on the side did that, and that wound up turning into a full-time job where for about a dozen years I was just selling my website to run fantasy football leagues and helping people with their draft. And and then after a while I got tired of that and jumped back into the workforce on there and got involved with some of the newer technology that was massive parallel processing, MPP technology, and the Tezas and Teradata. And that's when I first got introduced to Microsoft. Had a product called Parallel Data Warehouse that somebody on LinkedIn was posted that they're looking for somebody to an architect and a coder to use the Parallel Data Warehouse. And I had no idea what it was, but I contacted the person and
Hmm.
they told me. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And so I got involved in that project, and that's when I got introduced to some of the Microsoft people. So that was a big game changer in there. And they said, "Hey, you seem like a person that would be good at Microsoft." And they had this role called a technical sales professional. I was like, "What is that?" And he told me, and I said, "So you basically get paid to present." And he's like, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." So I said, "Oh, that would be something I want to do in my career right now." And then I switched over. And within Microsoft, I've been here 9 years. I've had 8 roles, 10 managers. People tend to move around a lot just because we get bored easily, and there's so many roles at Microsoft that you after every couple of years you're like, oh, that other role sounds interesting, and I'll jump to it. So that's a big part of that is networking and being aware, just like I said before, of other roles. You don't know what you don't know, so go out and investigate, build a network, ask people what kind of roles they're doing, and then that's something you may want to do in the future.
Hmm. That's awesome. Uh, yeah, I think I have many questions also related to that. Like, how do you build amazing relationships? How do you adapt to change? How do you keep up how do you keep up with learning and understanding new concepts? And like, yeah, I think the first thing that I would like to ask you is, when did you start writing?
Blogging. Yeah.
Blogging. And so when did you start, when did you got into writing, so blogs or anything, and then at what point did you start writing books?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Blogging, I started 13 or 14 years ago as a way because I would forget things. I was a consultant. I would be on a project. There'd be some kind of bug or problem, and I would spend sometimes days fixing the problem. And maybe it was something wrong with the software, and then I would go on another project and I'd run into the same problem, and I'd go, I can't remember how I fixed that one last one. So I said, I'm going to write a blog about this as a way to remember. It's sort of my own personal Google, and also a way to document for the person that I'm employed with to say, this is, I wrote down how I fixed this problem. And it was just
Hmm.
also a great way for me to learn new features or products. Was, oh, this is a new product, I'm going to learn about it, but I'm going to blog about it while I'm learning about it. And that sticks in my brain more on there. And then I found people like that. I took complex topics and simplified them. And so that was kind of the theme of my blog, was to make things easier to understand. Because I say my mind's simple, so I need to understand things at a very high level and then go deep. And so the blog helped me to communicate in that way, and it just became fun. And it's it's people always ask, how do you have the time? And it doesn't take a lot of time. You can sit down and write a blog post in an hour or two, or write every 10 minutes over a week. And that's sometimes what I do on there. But it's a great way for me to learn and keep things embedded in my mind longer, go into that long-term memory when I blog about it there. And there are times when I've, oh, this product, a customer wants to know about it, so let me go and research it. And then I realized, oh, I wrote a blog on this a couple of years ago, I completely forgot about it. So I read my blog and okay, I'm ready now on there. So that was the reasons for it. Is also, it just makes you a better writer on there. It builds your brand, so it's definitely helped me in my career. A lot of people know me through the blog. So if I go on a job interview, even within Microsoft, they're like, "Oh, I've been reading your blog for a long time." That's kind of like your resume. So it makes the interview a lot easier on there. And that blogging led to doing presenting there. So I took content in the blog, put them in slides, and then started presenting at conferences, very small conferences at first, and later. And in a short amount of time, I was able to present at some of the bigger conferences on there. And so I have and on my website I have a list of all the presentations I've done and the decks, and and that helped to build my brand also. And then a lot of those decks were used within Microsoft to present to customers on there. And one of them I started a number of years ago was about data architectures. It was started out as, what is a data warehouse, and then what is a data lake, and what is a modern data warehouse, and data fabric, and data lake house, and then a data mesh. And so I was creating this deck that I present many times, and I thought this probably would make a good book, and I can go more into detail. And that's what I said, I'll start writing this book. And it's a lot of work. It took a lot of time, but it allowed me to do a brain dump and take my blog and my presentations and what was in my head and put them in the book. It's kind of like my life's work over 40 years. Here's all the information and things I've learned and my take on it. And I found when I started doing the presentations on the architectures that people didn't understand the concepts very well. So I said, well, I'm going to make the book talk about the concepts and level set them, and then get into architectures there. And then it also helped when I'm talking to customers. And at Microsoft, I work in the federal, so a lot of U.S. government customers, and they tend to be
Hmm.
a little further behind in technology and understanding. And they would ask me questions, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's in the book. That's in the book. Oh, that one's not in the book. I should probably put that in the book and explain it there."
Mm.
And so that's how the book developed on there. And then over like 14, 15 months, I finished the book, and then started sending it out to customers, and I got great feedback. They're like, "Oh, now I understand this." And now a lot of times when I present, I go, "Well, if you want more information, it's in my book, so get that and you can learn more."
Awesome. I think from here I have two main questions. but the first one being you have a very deep understanding of the evolution until data mesh, and so maybe what's next. I've heard different concepts that might be in the continuation of data mesh, but would it be possible if high level you share kind of your vision of the evaluation of tables, tables framework or databases, um, and maybe like your overall. I mean, this is a very big question, so it might be hard, but maybe you have an idea of how do you perceive the evolution of the field and the technology, and do you have an idea of where it's going, or what are the problems that we have today that we might tackle in the next 5 years, for example?
Yeah, if you look at I'll try to give a short history of data warehousing in general. We had many years ago
Hmm.
in the 70s or even earlier, you had databases in there, a way to store all this transactional data. Maybe it's orders and customer information in there. And so you had all these applications that had a lot of this data, and then people would be entering information, updates, inserts, deletes, and then people also were doing reporting off of that database. And the problem was reports are a lot of reads, and it was clashing with people who were trying to do the writes. And so warehousing came about. Let's take all that data that's in that, say, that customer database, and copy it into a we'll call a warehouse, and do reporting off that. And we'll just keep that warehouse updated with, maybe every day we'll send over the new customer information on there, and people report off of that, so we're not colliding with those people trying to do the transactional type of work. And that's where data
Hmm.
warehouses came in there. And there's many reasons why you have a data warehouse, but the biggest one is to offload the reporting on there. And then, hey, let's combine it with all this other data. We have we're trying to do reports. Why do we want reports and dashboards? To make better business decisions, to get more insights to our data. Well, if we have customer data, let's supplement it with product data, and maybe data about the weather, and find out sales data, and why aren't they buying. And so this data warehouse started growing on there. Well, then as it started growing, you started having problems with the architectures, and big data back in my day was like a couple of megabytes, and now then we went to gigabytes and terabytes and now petabytes on there. So the systems and technology had evolved, but because the type of data, the size and the speed and the type has changed over the years, you needed other solutions. And that's where the data lake came about, to store data that is not relational nature, because databases, the relational tables on there and relational storage. And it's a lot of work to up front to get data in there. You got to create the database and the tables and the fields. And then the data lake came around that was schema on read, meaning I could just, it's like a glorified file folder, and I could just dump data in there without any upfront work. And it could be non-relational data, semi-structured, it could be unstructured media files. And so a data lake became a place to store non-relational data. And then you had your database that was relational. Your data warehouse was relational data in there. So that was called the modern data warehouse, where you had both of those, and you were able to create reports and dashboards off of non-relational data and relational data. And then the data lake was hyped up too much when it first came out. It was, you can do everything with it. You don't even need a relational database or relational data warehouse, and that didn't work because of the complexity of the data lake on there. But over time, the technology got better, and for the last maybe dozen years, people generally built solutions with both the data lake and a relational data warehouse. And now the relational data warehouse is going away, and we come into this called data lake house. You had a data lake and a data warehouse, and instead of having both, you combine them and have a data lake house. And the difference between that and a data lake was technology got advanced, and software layers on top of the data lake, in particular Delta Lake, gave it additional functionality. The data lake, additional functionality to be relational data warehouse like, to be able to do things that a data lake cannot do, like individual updates, deletes, and inserts, and whatnot. And so data lakehouse has become very popular, and that's pretty much the approach that Microsoft's doing now with their product called Microsoft Fabric. and what most customers are doing is building a data lakehouse. And then the data mesh came along a few years ago, and that was more of a organizational change. And it could take a long time to explain what a data mesh is, but the idea is instead of copying everything and centralizing it, you have domains within your company, sort of like organizations, and they keep the data and they create the analytical data. So you have this decentralized approach where all these domains, instead of copying all their transactional data and centralizing it, they keep the data, the transactional data, create the analytical data, but then create an interface that anybody can go to grab their data and put it together for dashboards and reports. Now, each of those domains can build out their analytical solution using a data lakehouse. So they kind of commingle on that. But data mesh is much more of an organizational and cultural shift. It's not really a technology on that. And that is, I tell people, you don't have to go to the full data mesh concept, but you can use pieces of it to build out your solution. And and what I talk about a lot in the book is here's all the architectures, here's the pros and cons of each, understand them all, and then pick out the bits and pieces that are going to work best for your particular situation, because everybody's different. It all depends on your data size, speed, and the type. So when I draw up architectures for customers, they're always different on there. And so it's not one size fits all. And so the idea is to make something and build something specific to your particular use case.
Hmm. Amazing. And so if we push forward, now we combine data lakes or delta lakes, and we're combining with data mesh. And I understand. And by the way, thank you very much for doing this retrospective. I always love to hear it, and it always fascinates me how recent everything is, and how everything is growing so fast. So I
Oh yeah.
always really enjoy to hear that. Um, so are you familiar with like new ways to manage data, or like alternatives to data mesh, or like new things that might be coming in the next years? Have you seen or discussed with some people about things that you're very curious in this very fast evolving field?
Yeah. And it's fascinating how quick the technology moves, and that's why it's so hard to predict. Just think a year and a half ago, nobody knew what OpenAI is or ChatGPT. Now it's everywhere, and Copilot, and constantly people are coming up with new models and new ways of using them. So it's fascinating me to think that a year and a half ago we weren't even talking about any of this stuff. Shows you, shows you it's hard to predict. What I see coming is sort of a merging between the AI and what I just talked about, the data architectures in there. The data architectures are dealing with data. How can I make better business decisions with this data? Now we're getting into how can I make better business decisions with text and documents or text from the internet. And so when we look at these large language models, they're just trained on the entire internet. And now I can ask questions of that and get answers. And maybe that can help me with my business. But even better, can I train these models on documents that my company has that are not on the internet and create this model that I can start asking questions of? And that can help me make better business decisions. And that's what's coming a lot now. And I think that's going to grow in the future, where I want to use ChatGPT on my own data and maybe supplement that with the internet on there. Now, what I see coming is, can I take that text from all these documents to make better business decisions along with the data, combine the two? And that's where I'm starting to write some blogs on that, where I want a data warehouse, but that data warehouse now becomes not just data, but also text from documents, a large language model. So maybe I put a bot in front of that and I ask about customers, and it's the large language model. That bot is going and pulling data as well as all that text and giving you a better answer. So I can ask about my customers, and it could say, well, I have customer information in the database. I'm gonna use that to get answers with. And I, all these customers have documents where they filled out maybe a survey and or a questionnaire, or it was some problem they have with resolution, and it's all in text. Maybe it's even recordings of conversations with the customers, and I'm going to pull all that along with the data to give you a better answer of here's information about the customers from their data, and then I pulled in information from these surveys, so I'm going to put that to give you a better answer.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like it's kind of an well, the way I see it, hearing your words, and the way and from what I'm familiar with today, and I totally relate to you. No one could have predict the OpenAI. Maybe a few people could because they were involved, but the it goes so fast that it is not an intent to predict or to be like superstitious or to be like to be driven by science fictions or anything. But with the years in your career, I feel like it's very relevant and interesting to have this vision of, okay, we were here, now we're having this, these are the new things, so we might be able to go there and have something uh, in the idea of this. And what you mentioned seems to me like an agentic systems that can like really augment not only the data or not only your system and help you managing and so on, but also like with your data plus some knowledge that I gather that is relevant to the decisions that you might take.
Yeah,
I'll get that and I'll give you also like maybe advice or reflect or ways to improve or yeah, yeah, I did this little part, but yeah, yeah, it's super hard to like predict, but also it makes sense when like everyone this year I've heard many times that it's like the multimodal year, and so everyone's like pushing the multimodal barriers on those models. So the context windows are getting bigger and bigger. The techniques that are being used are being revolutionized on a constant basis, which will lead me to my next question. But yeah, it makes sense. So, like you said, this field is evolving very, very fast. So, before asking you a bit more about Microsoft and a few other things, I'd like to have your insights on how do you keep up to date? How do you make sure that when you go and talk with clients or with your peers, um, that what you're I mean, I assume also, sorry for adding that, but some of the key concepts don't get old, and like the maybe some names changes a lot of times, but the relying concepts behind them are just like maybe slightly modifications of what already exists. That being said, how do you keep up to date with all the information and making sure that you don't get comfortable, if I can say? Because, like you said before, you always keep on learning and you enjoy it.
yeah, and you made a good point about these concepts are similar, and you find history repeating itself, especially with the data mesh. Many years ago, there was the idea everything gets centralized, and then there was arguments over Kimball and Inman method, and essentially the arguments came out to be: do we have individual data marts that are decentralized? And and so customers went down that route, and then we went back to being centralized. And now with the data mesh, it's decentralized again. So when it came out, I was like, oh, this is this same discussion we had 15, 20 years ago. So history tends to repeat
Mm.
itself. And that helps because then you don't listen to the hype. You go, oh, we've been through this before. What about the negative part of all this? What are the cons or the concerns you have to have about this? Because it sounds great in theory, but what is it practical? And so that's where I'm somewhat skeptical of anything that comes out that seems like this great panacea. And that kind of happened with the data mesh, where wait a minute, this let's think through this because we went through this before, and here are the concerns you need to be aware about on that. So that helps me being older to recognize and not get too attached to something new because there's always going to be that problems with it. And and so I always have a sense when something comes out from my experience of whether I think it's going to be something that I should focus on. And within Microsoft, there's hits and misses. They come out with new products, and sometimes I think that's going to be really good, and other times I'm going to ignore that because I don't think that's going to go anywhere. And so the way I keep up with information, fortunately at Microsoft, we get emails every day with here's what we're working on, and I build a network, and so people tell me, oh, there's this new project we're working on. Oh, what's that? What can I spend some time and learn about that? And and then we're fed a lot of information about, well, here's a new features coming out, and sometimes it's I don't get any advance. Like at Microsoft Fabric conference, there was a lot of stuff that came out. I had no idea that was coming out, so I had to go and research it. So to keep up with this is just having your pulse on things, whether it's reading blogs or news feeds or subscribing to certain emails on there. There's a handful of things, and I think I blogged about this of what I follow to keep up with things on there, and then having that network where people are telling you things, and then spending time to go and research it and thinking, well, this is something that's could be fun to learn, and I think it'll have some legs and be around for a while. And if you can have a sense of whether something's going to be big and dive into it, even better. Like OpenAI, I was like, this is going to be a big game changer. I'm going to learn about it, and then I focused a lot on that. So I was kind of at the forefront with that, especially things like the data mesh. Even though I didn't agree that it's going to take over the world, it was a lot of people are going to want to talk about this. So I need to get ahead of this and learn it. So I went and researched and found out everything about the data mesh I could, and then put it in my own words and created my deck on that. So it's just a matter of don't sit isolated and have the growth mindset of always wanting to learn on there and always seeking out other people and things they're blogging or presenting about, and go to conferences and read those blogs and then get a sense of what's going to be popular. And I even tell people, go on interviews. Even if you're happy with your work, go every 6 months or so, and then you talk to a bunch of companies, and you may notice a pattern, like they're all starting to talk about this. And I think back in my career, and it was, why is everybody talking about Visual Basic or C Sharp, and then you notice that, oh, this seems like it's going to be big because a lot of companies are now asking for this technology, so I should learn it so I'm more marketable.
Makes sense. And it relates to what you said before, being comfortable in the uncomfortable, or
Yeah.
something related. Maybe I'm using the wrong words, but I really like this idea of uh, just it's okay if I don't know this. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm missing, but there is no fear of missing out either. It's more like you have key sources. By the way, I think it could be great to put in the keynotes of this recording the blog post where you have all your references and what you follow and where you get your information. But I feel like finding or sources of information that will frequently come back to, because there are too many out there. So kind of phrasing that and having this list of, okay, this is going to be what I'll follow, not more, and then just let, if I understand correctly also from what you say, like following your curiosity about the concepts based on what you've seen before and what you're into and what might be interesting in the future, but not only for the word but also like for my curiosity. And I think that's very interesting. I don't know if you want to add something on that.
I think that with experience and time, I've gotten really good at finding the golden nuggets within information on there. And although my brain is slower to process things, I could, I'm really good at that cramming in there. So when I go and look at these blogs and there's all this information, let me cut through the weeds and figure out what do I need to know on that. Or a customer says, hey, we want to learn about, can you talk about this product? And I go, oh man, I don't know anything about that product. Can I go to the right sources and find the right blogs or videos or decks to quickly upskill on that? And that just with experience, you just learn to cut through the weeds and not take the long route. You know, it's like my son, he's smarter than me because his brain neurons fire faster, but when I see the way he thinks, he takes these long paths to get. I was like, why don't you just go straight there? And it's just a lot of it is just experience. But over time, you find out those people you should be listening to, those conferences you should go to on there, the network of people you should reach out to who can explain things to you quickly on that. And this way, you're not inundated. Otherwise, you'll be overloaded. There's way too much to learn. And then, as I mentioned before, specialize. Don't say, I'm going to learn everything about data platform and AI, because you could spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you'll never learn everything. My God, with the AI and just all the large language models and different ways of doing things in there, it'll be too much. So just say, well, I'm going to focus in on a subset of that and become really good at that, and that'll be my focus. Maybe over time you expand it or you move on there, but don't try to take on everything. Just take a subset of what's the most interesting part, and then go and learn that.
Yeah. And that's where collaboration becomes very interesting, because then you'll be focused and curious about one specific thing, and you will be friends, or you will exchange with people who are in the same field but curious about another thing. And because you're both at the same level of curiosity, then you will be able to upskill yourself very, like, way much faster, because you already have concepts in the field. And because of the same degree of curiosity, you just start growing and growing, and have a bigger, better picture. At least I assume that, but this is kind of a affirmation question, if you want to follow up on that.
Fantastic point. And that's what I do at Microsoft. So although I'm data and AI, and there's a bunch of us, what we'll do is I'll say, look, I'm going to concentrate more on the data stuff. And how about what you're interested in AI? Why don't you concentrate more on that? And then if I have a customer and they want to go deep into AI, I'll pull you in, or and vice versa. If they want data platform, you pull me in there. Or even within data platform, I'll go, I'm going to focus more on the relational aspect. And there's another person who is interested in the NoSQL, the Cosmos DB. I said, okay, you become an expert on that. And to your point, we all now have knowledge about almost all the technologies, but it's spread out. And so then what happens with customers then is, if they want to know a technology that I'm not good at, but I know one of my colleagues is, I'll either bring them in and they'll talk to the customer and I learn like the customer's learning, or I will say, can you brief me before and explain this all to me? And this way I have the knowledge quickly on there. So working together with those others is a fantastic point. And I highly suggest, whether you can do it at work or outside of work, have people who have somewhat different interests in the same topic, and then utilize them and utilize each other in order to cover the full spectrum, and also to help you upskill those other technologies much more quickly.
Awesome, amazing. Thanks for the tips. Um, I think I'd like to take a transversal, I guess, on data and AI. So I'll throw many topics, and you pick whatever you want inside. But in the last few years, so we have the partnership with OpenAI and Microsoft. We have all those open source companies. Those models are getting better and better, and the open source aspects of it. Um, Vector database that have been here for some time, but that are getting, so there are many people doing that. And so all of that, I wouldn't call it AI itself, because of course AI was there for way longer, with like classical machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, and so on. But with this new big picture of the field, the relationships that Microsoft have with OpenAI and so on, do you have insights, or do you have things that you talk with your clients that could be interesting to add to the table, in terms of when we discuss AI or data in AI more broadly?
Well, you bring up a good point too, that this is AI, this large language model, but it's very different than what you say classical. It's probably a good way to
Yep.
discuss it on that. And it's a completely different skill set too. So it's somewhat like, oh, spent all the time learning machine learning in this classical sense, and now it's completely different in there. There's some crossover, but I find with customers, it's just a whole new world to them, and explaining how this differentiates these large language models with the traditional models on there, and it's helping understanding on a high level, not context in there, because they need to upskill and get trained on that. And how do I do that when with this whole new approach to things on there? And at Microsoft, there's open source like OpenAI, and even within some of our products, we use Spark and open source Spark and whatnot. So there's always, and Postgres, and there's always that component to it. And we work with customers who just want to be an open source, and we have open source groups within Microsoft, which surprised me when I came here a number of years ago. But Microsoft contributes to it, and so we just go where customers are, and if it's open source, then we'll work with them on that. And OpenAI is a big one too in there. And so yeah, we have enhancements to OpenAI, but still the basic is the same, uh, and that's throughout our products on there. So in the end, what it comes down to with customers is what are your products you're using, what's your skill set, and then we'll help you to enhance those. And then you don't know what you don't know, so we'll make you aware of other ways of doing things that may be better or not. But a lot of customers, they don't have the time to keep up with the list. They have their day jobs, so we keep up with it, and then we go to them and we know their use case, and then we say, well, you may want to be interested in this new technology because it fits your use case, and let me give you a quick summary of it, and then we can decide whether that's something you want to use. And maybe we do a POC to, to show you it, or for you to learn and whatnot. But every customer is different, and that's what kind of makes it fun, is you never know what to expect. Use cases that I'm involved in the federal U.S. government are very different than commercial and finance and healthcare.
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So that'll be very interesting. Do you have maybe one example of the many things that you've been doing at Microsoft that can, um, like, I don't know if a use cases. This is kind of a hard question, but I'm curious about like a hands-on project or something that you've been part of that really impressed you or that you really enjoyed, maybe a use case or a project inside of Microsoft, um, that that you were really having fun with, either because of the client, because of the industry, or because of the technology.
Well, there's a million of them, and some of them early on in the projects in there, but one in particular is with the FCC. They have, and this is all public knowledge, there's a website that all radio stations, TV stations are required to upload information about advertisements, about the political parties, and they have to have equal time and charge equal in there. So they're tasked by Congress to keep track of all this information in there. Well, the challenge is there's no standard of how radio TV stations will upload these documents. They could be printed, they could be handwritten. So they're having this huge challenge that we're looking into of how can we pull out all this information and use it and get insights, not only FCC, but they're tasked with allowing the public to go and easily look at this data. Somebody may say, I want to make sure this city is, and all their TV stations are given equal time to Republicans and Democrats.
Hmm.
How can I do that? Well, here's all the documents. Well, if it's just a bunch of printed documents, that's going to be really difficult. So what we're doing with OpenAI and Azure OpenAI is, and a number of technologies, is you take those documents, you scan them all in, and then you use optical character recognition and a number of tools that will pull the information out there, because that information could be a PDF that's printed, or it could be a PDF that's handwritten. So we have these technologies that'll pull information out, and this is part of the project, is a way that they can upload all these documents. When they're uploaded, it scans all these documents, pulls out all the text from that, and then take that text and not just lend it in a database, but rather put it in a search index, and then tie a bot front into it, and then have those large language models learn from those documents. So if somebody asked a question, could be tell me all the Republicans and Democrats and all the ads. It's going to go through the search index, find the appropriate documents that have that information, and then send that to the large language model, which is going to take all that text and do its magic and come back and say, I looked at all the documents. There's this much time spent for Republicans, this much for Democrats. Here's a link to all the TV stations, because that's what you asked, that are having ads, and here's the cost. So if you want more information, you can click on the document, but I've summarized it all for you, and here's the results. That's a really cool project that we're early stages of looking at, because their challenge too is they have thousands of documents that are uploaded every day on that. So
Mm.
it's a great example of using multiple technologies. Even the bot front end on there is written in applications, it's built applications for that to collect all that information, and then the bot, and then sending the answer over to the customer on that. So that's one really cool use case that is unique in the government, in the federal government sector.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for saying that. I would have many questions. I think it could be super interesting to get into the details, but I'm not sure it wouldn't be even possible for you to disclose a few things. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It seems like a rag, and so we could discuss about all the techniques. Also, like how do you collect all the front end part of it, and like how do you collect all this data to like improve the back end and the entire solution that is behind. A few techniques for people who are listening and like about RAG. I really enjoy this idea of compressing the data, and so like it filters out from the documents before doing a kind of retrieval the most relevant information, and it doesn't just do the RAG on these documents. So, but I won't get too much into that. Thank you very much for sharing this. I would have many more questions, but I think we'll jump into the few questions that are at the end of this episode. Before that, if you're still listening, thank you very much for being on the show. I hope you're having an amazing time. I know that I do. Feel free to subscribe and like if you enjoy. Let us a comment. Thank you very much, James. And so here are the three last questions. The first one being, um, where can people know more about yourself, your blog, or wherever you're at?
My blog is jamesserra.com. So go there and you'll have information, all my blogs, and then all my presentations, and my emails up there. If you have any questions, just shoot it over. And then if you go, you can see subtle advertising. That's the name of my book on Amazon if you're interested in learning more about that.
Amazing. And I'll just do the last question, which is, do you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be inspirational, it can be professional, it can be personal, it can be whatever you want. What's your message for
uh,
us?
you're at the cusp of something fantastic, and I think we've only scratched the surface of what OpenAI and large language models can do to improve our life. I'm using it every day. ChatGPT, Copilot, on that. This is a complete game changer. This is like when the internet came out. On that, it's that big, and the stuff that Microsoft has publicly announced and stuff they're still working on is amazing. I like in Teams. I go there, and if I'm late to a Teams channel, a Teams meeting will say, "You missed the first 10 minutes. You want to use Copilot to summarize what you missed?" And I go, "This is blowing my mind on there." And we're just seeing the art of the possible of what you can do with OpenAI. So if you're in AI, I would strongly suggest focusing a lot on the large language model aspect of that. You mentioned RAG and all these concepts on that are going to be hugely popular, and it's a really exciting time, because I imagine we can talk in a year and there are going to be things coming out with OpenAI that, and new models that we never even anticipated, and who knows what incredible things we do now. Look at what they're doing now with pictures. Just go and put in commands and you have a picture, or videos now. Show me the Old West, and you have a 30-second video of the Old West, and you just tell what you want, and there. So it's really amazing stuff. So I think if you're an AI, you're in one of the most exciting fields that is out there in the technology.
Definitely. James, thank you very much for taking this time to do this, to record today. I had an amazing time, and I wish you to have an amazing day.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.